And I get to sit beside,
We're going to be talking about the master
I
plan.
get to sit close to Miss Murray.
That's right. Sunglasses away.
Board of Education election this time?
We don't need an invocation or anything like that.
Yes, not me, but yes, there is.
I don't think we
I
ever
was
do.
thinking
Drink
earlier
candies?
myself. There are
Hey,
Was
four
there not,
spots,
was there not
four
enough?
spots with 5 runners.
you ever go to that,
I think.
the breakfast at the
No.
Elks Club for
3
Children's
spots
Village?
and 4 runners.
You don't go? September
Yes, there
7th.
was. There was.
I'm
No.
guest
Leroy.
waiter this
Because
year.
it wasn't enough for the,
There
to
was a
cover.
I have to put you down
primary,
for-
but the Board of Education was not.
It's a day,
doing
it's
it.
this Friday, but it starts at 7. But I have to make reservations so they know how much food
I don't know why it just popped in my mind.
to make. Okay.
Alternative
Ask
thing,
Wayne if he'll
3
come.
months
I'm gonna start going out of
for the
town here
others
soon.
was
I gotta go.
very
I gotta-
confusing.
Your mic's on.
Huh?
Your mic's hot.
I'm just saying I gotta start going away here soon.
Oh. I'm supposed to go to the beach. I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Not looking forward to the 7.5-hour drive. Hatteras.
How are these things that picking up? Do we need to move it?
You might want to make sure you're talking.
I'm trying to talk Randy Wagner.
Well, there you go.
Playing the parachute.
Well, Mr. Becker's present, so now we can get started. No, how are you, Mr. Becker? So, good morning to everyone. I'd like to thank the Board of Education for hosting our joint meeting here at your wonderful facility here this morning. Present, we have all 5 county commissioners, and I see a majority of your board members. Are we waiting on anyone else?
I think we're all here.
Okay. So with that, good morning, and then I'd just like to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Williams, and then she can tell us what's on our agenda for today.
Thank you, President Klein. Good morning.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for the.
Oh, I'm sorry,
did hear
President.
that.
Excuse me.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about Ms.
I
Stauffer.
changed your name, President Baker. Good
worry
morning,
about it, Mrs.
President
Stauffer.
Baker, Vice President Klein, and Commissioners. I do
No.
apologize.
I've been called worse.
Did you hear him? He called you Mrs. Stauffer. Did you hear that?
No,
She heard me.
little levity is a good thing. Okay. We're here this morning to present the Educational Facilities Master Plan, and we have with us our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Jeffrey Prue, and staff, Rob Rollins, Director of Facilities Planning and Development, Mark Mills, Director of Facilities Maintenance and Operations, and Chad Criswell, Senior Project Manager and Planning Supervisor. They will be making our presentation, and we hope that you'll ask questions afterwards and offer comments. Your comments will help us gauge the support that we'll have for this plan, and will help us with some decision-making going forward as we update this yearly. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Michael, the superintendent, and hope that he doesn't mess things up as I did. So Dr. Michael, you're on.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming today. Today's an opportunity, much like we've done in the past, to share about our Educational Facilities Master Plan. With almost 50 facilities in the county, over 1,000 acres of property to take care of, over 3.4, counting this building, 3.5 million square feet to maintain annually and to keep updated with roof, boiler, chiller, doors, envelope of the building, floors, walls, ceiling, paint, those types of things. This is a very important topic that we need to address every year and keep track of how we're going to avoid a situation where we get to the point that we have a significant amount of deferred maintenance or end up throwing good money after bad as a result of not keeping up with our facilities and maintenance efforts. So today we're going to share a little bit. Staff came to me back in the fall into the winter, and we're going to present the same plan that we presented over the last number of years, and I said that doesn't make any sense. It's been clear that that plan cannot be supported or sustained long-term. We need to start thinking about our facilities lasting longer We won't be replacing them at the rate that we'd like to see them replaced, maybe every 50 years at the most. So we need to look at a different way and a different plan. So they came back this spring, where we're going to start looking at, not by choice, but probably by necessity, how we might combine facilities, how we can reduce operating costs. Again, it's not things that we necessarily want to do, but things we think we'll have to do from a fiscally responsible standpoint and based on the economic circumstances of Washington County Public Schools. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Prue and staff.
Morning, Commissioners and board members. As Mrs. Williams indicated, this is our Educational Facilities Master Plan. It is updated annually, and we'll roll to the slides. If staff can get us set up to the slideshow on the screens. So the Educational Facility Master Plan evaluates where we are in terms of our community. What are the developments that are coming on the horizon? How are they expanding? How are they developing? What sort of enrollment changes are we seeing? We take a look at our facility inventory to get an assessment of how is each building performing. Do we have the available seats that we need? Are those facilities in a declining stage, and how do we rank them to be ready for renovations? It also reviews our board policies. It's integral to make note here that this is updated annually. So we can look at a plan one year and change it the next based on changing demographics in the community, changing needs within our schools, and ultimately we're looking to build a fiscally responsible plan, and this becomes the basis for the 5-year capital improvement program, what we just refer to as the CIP, of course, that we will submit to both the state and the county for long-term funding. So that gives you an overview of where we are moving forward. Mr. Rollins is going to give you a sense of where we are with the infrastructure and what the plan looks like for the coming 5 years.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just some statistics here that Dr. Michael mentioned. We have 1,100 acres of property that we maintain, and we have 47 buildings with students in them. These numbers don't include this building and the property we sit on right now, nor does it include the 820 Commonwealth property where the transportation center is. That's why Dr. Michael said 3.5 million square feet. We have that many, but in schools we have 3.37. So it's important to note on this slide, with 47 schools, 24 of them were built in the 70s or earlier. So we have a real aging inventory of facilities. 10 of those are elementary schools. When we look at the ideal preventive maintenance program, we'd like to replace buildings every 50 years. We look at our roofs. We have life cycles for all our systems that we look at. So when we come to you with systemic project requests for replacement of those systems, these are the kind of years we're hoping to get out of those systems when we put them in. And of course, our buildings, we have 47 that would relate to needing to replace almost one a year to keep up a 50-year life cycle on the buildings. Last year last year's Educational Facility Master Plan, which was presented to our board and approved and then sent on to the county, looked like this. We had 3 years between middle schools that we were looking at the time, and that would relate to about 141-year life cycle that would need to be sustained for each of those buildings. We get that life cycle by multiplying the number of buildings simply by the number of years between openings. If we're on a 3-year cycle, we'd have to replace a building every 141 years, or expect one to last that long. What was approved by the county commissioners in its CIP put 4 years between those projects, which would relate to a expected life cycle of 188 years between school buildings. So based on this, as Dr. Michael said, we looked at how we can come up with a responsible plan and how we can improve that replacement cycle, how we can improve operational efficiency, at the same time do that at the lowest cost possible with construction. We also wanted to improve our early childhood education opportunities. So we looked at elementary schools. One of the reasons we looked at elementary schools is we looked to our neighbors to the east in Carroll and Frederick. Carroll has a student population just about the same size as ours, but they have 5 less elementary schools. Frederick County has a student population almost double Washington County's. They have about 1.5 times more elementary schools. So they're not doubling their elementary schools for double the population, they only have 1.5. Their schools have more capacity. The statewide average for elementary school capacity is about 500 students per school. Washington County has 16 schools that are lower than 500. In fact, we have 10 that are less than 300 students. So we started looking at elementary schools that had adjacencies that might allow us to combine them. First, we looked at Hickory Elementary and Fountain Rock Elementary. We looked at Old Forge and Greenbrier. Just as a note that I didn't say in the beginning, the beige, as noted on the slides, the beige areas are schools that are greater than 400 capacity, and the light areas are schools that are less than 300. We also looked at Potomac Heights and Fountaindale Elementary. From a construction standpoint, we're starting to look at a prototype school design. We'd like to propose that. We think that it can save money, lower the design cost, use a common educational specification. We can also design it, like we did Jonathan Hager, to be able to be expandable. At Hager, we built a 3-round school, but we left area on the building pad to be able to increase the capacity of that school 2 more rounds or 10 more classrooms. It could go up to a 785 now student capacity. Right. One of the keys on using a prototype school, though, is to build the schools fairly rapidly. If you spread them out too far, educational specifications change, technology changes, security can change, and construction methods can change, and it might be that you have a design that is no longer efficient or good to build. But if we build them in fairly rapid succession, contractor familiarity helps. The change orders can be reduced through the refined designs, and we'd have less requested changes internally by building them one after the other. The ed spec stays the same. Thanks, Jeff. So looking at these 6 schools that we listed on the maps, you can see that they have a combined capacity of 1,800 students, combined square footage of 244, and we maintain 73 acres at those schools. Also to note, 3 of those schools are on septic and well water systems, and we'd really like to get our schools on public water systems. I think that's important from a health and safety standpoint as well as just operational efficiency. 5 of those 6 schools are open type schools. So I know from the task force for security, we looked at, one of the things we looked at was reducing the number of open schools. 5 of these 6 could be eliminated if we followed this plan. Also, there's 12 portable classrooms at those buildings. If we build the 3 new schools we're hoping to be approved, we would eliminate those 12 portable classrooms.
So when you build 3 new schools, how does that affect the 188-year plan?
Right. I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but
That's fine.
okay? All right. So with the 3 new schools, if we built them all at that 785 student level right off the bat, if the enrollment in the county supported building them out that big, we'd have 2,300 seats. We'd increase 500 seats above what we have right now in capacity. But the square footage of those buildings only increases by 14,000. So we're getting 500 seats for 14,000 square feet. That's really good efficiency there. Also, from an acreage standpoint, we'd like to build one of those schools right out here on the property that we have. All the amenities are here, and it doesn't cost the county or the school board anything to use the land we have. The other 2 schools, we'd have to find property and figure out how to bring water and sewer if it's not there already. Hopefully we can find property that it's close or it's already there. So our acreage would drop by 40. We'd have ourselves on public water systems. They wouldn't be open schools. and there'd be no portable classrooms. So if we were to follow this plan, right now this is what the county looks like. The beige areas are schools that are over 400 students, and the white ones on the perimeter mainly are schools that are under 400. We're building Sharpsburg Elementary School over the next couple years. We're getting ready to go out to bid at the end of this month, in fact. So when that opens, that'll be another school that's above 400. If we follow the plan that we're presenting to you, those other areas, those 6 schools would be filled in with 3, and you'd have the core of the county in larger schools. We're reducing the number of schools overall. Interesting to note, these blue and orange dots represent active developments and developments that are in concept phase that might come to fruition. If you look at where we're going to have the schools with that capacity, it mirrors where the development is. So if we're looking at school capacity as an engine for development, also there's possibilities there. And then I think from that, I turn it over to Jeff.
So we want to try to lay out for you again, what is the cost of the plan? I think that's definitely of concern. One of the things that Dr. Michael has charged us with as well is to come up with a plan that is also fiscally responsible. So we want to walk you through what some of these numbers look like. So the 6 schools we're talking about are some of the lowest. 6 of the 7 are 6 of the schools are in our bottom 7 lowest rated schools, elementary schools in our facility assessment. So within the next number of years, those schools will need to be at least renovated if not replaced. So if you look at renovating these 6 identified schools, you're looking at a total cost of $158 million, where $79 million of that comes from local funds. All 6 will exceed 50 years in the next decade in terms of their age. Construction of 3 new buildings pales in comparison to that, where it will cost $112 million or $46 million less. $40 million in local funding, which is $31 million less in local dollars. So to create this plan, building 3 new schools, closing 6 as opposed to renovating those, saves the county $31 million in the near term. Whether that is over the next 10 years, over the next 20 years, but it's a savings of $31 million to the county and to its taxpayers. From a land needs perspective, as Mr. Rollins mentioned, we propose that the first school is built on this site, so there's no additional land cost today. We could begin working on designs without having to wait to find the appropriate piece of land. We have it available to us. We would also need to find the land then for the 2nd and 3rd sites at locations to be determined, and we would work with county staff through that process to find the appropriate space, which again saves money in the near term because we have land available to us, so it saves on overall costs moving forward.
Excuse me, of those
Yes, sir.
6 sites that you're referencing there on the renovation cost, none of those sites would work for one of the other 2 school sites?
Potentially.
We would look at that when we're looking at the land, but they might not be in the right location if you're trying to combine schools. You want to try to center that new school. We wouldn't throw them out necessarily. We consider them, but they may or not be. Also, some of the sites are pretty tight, and so if you're trying to put a new school next to it, an existing school, and keep it open, it might be difficult to do. But we'll definitely look at it.
They'll go to utilities too.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Additionally, we think we can reduce our operational costs. Based on what we saw through the construction of Jonathan Hager and the closing of Winter Street and Conococheague, each new school will save approximately $1.25 million annually in general fund dollars over similar operations of the 2 separate schools. We reduce our acreage to maintain, we reduce the number of buildings to maintain, so as we think about the other building infrastructure systems, boilers, chillers, roofing systems, overall envelope, we're dealing now with 1 as opposed to 2, or 3 as opposed to 6. The building square footage to maintain is almost about the same, only an increase of 14,000 square feet, but we, again, receive additional capacity of 550 students out of that 14,000 square feet, which is very efficient. We also can reduce the number of support and administrative positions to hire in the future. So again, 6 building principals today compared to 3 building principals moving forward. As we've talked about through the Security Task Force in relation to Senate Bill 1265, the need for school resource officers for security, and how does that impact county and city operations. There's potentially an opportunity to reduce that number as well as savings in food services and custodians and so forth. Mr. Myers.
Okay, when you're doing all this, this is great as far as saving, you know, the number of principals and so forth. But what about classroom size?
In terms of student size,
I mean, if you know, you're increasing the number of students per school, obviously. I mean, has there been accommodations for the number of classrooms to keep the classroom size to the appropriate number?
we would. There'd be no change in the student population per classroom. You know, and of course that number fluctuates. One of the bonuses that I think we'll see in an upcoming slide is, and I would defer to our instructional staff, but in a larger building, we're able to better manage bubbles in the student enrollment and the population, because now an influx of 15 students in a particular grade can be managed better with 5 classrooms per grade than it can with 2 classrooms per grade. We could spread that load a little bit better. So we have an opportunity there to flatline potentially student enrollment per classroom a little bit better than we can in small schools.
Very important.
In terms of educational considerations with this plan, first and foremost, we reduce portable classrooms, which increases safety and supervision. You know, we talked a lot through Senate Bill 1265 and the Security Task Force about what can we do to increase security in locations where we have portable classrooms. Well, this plan will actually eliminate the portable classrooms that are available at those current 6 sites. We provide additional dedicated pre-kindergarten space. So one of our initiatives, as you know, has been early childhood education and bringing students into pre-kindergarten education environments that are managed by the school system. And we have an opportunity to build that additional space through the education specification process. We provide newer state-of-the-art facilities to more students at a faster rate. So if we can, in the next 10 years, outfit these 3 new schools as opposed to, let's say, renovating the 6 schools over, let's say, 20-year period, we bring new state-of-the-art classrooms to our students at a much faster rate. We can increase educational opportunities for students. Again, we can do more in a larger school environment than potentially we can in a smaller environment, because it takes larger resources to work across multiple buildings, you know, several buildings as opposed to fewer buildings. So we can work through that process. Providing full-time support staff. So in a smaller building, you may have a half-time counselor, a half-time gym teacher, half-time music teacher. In our larger buildings, it's one dedicated staff person in that building that are there on a regular basis every day. So we have that opportunity as well. Additional rounds better mitigate the student-teacher ratios, as we just discussed through your question, Commissioner Myers. We also provide full-size gymnasiums and play fields for student and community use as well. So as you know, anytime we're building a new building, we're doing the full-size gym, so they're available for our community use on a regular basis. Looking at the large capital projects, what this might look like in terms of our capital improvement plan moving forward, you do see a change where we have flipped out, honestly, our middle school renovations that were in the plan to work through the new school prototype designs and to get them to fruition. There is 2 years between each of the openings, with the first intended opening to be for fiscal year 24, with the last one in 28. So across a approximate 5-year span there, we would open the 3 new schools, each of them 2 years apart. Commissioner Baker, you asked about the expected life cycle. Reducing the life cycle here is a good first step. We go from 47 buildings, replacing 1 every 2 years as a 94 plan. We would drop to 44 buildings. If we can replace 1 every 2 moving forward, we're down to 88 years. So we are able to take 6 years off the plan. It's a good first step. There may be more consolidation that we need to look for moving forward, but this is a good step to get started. So funding considerations, looking at capital funding from the local perspective, we do increase the average local CIP request by approximately $2 million above what's shown in FY19. But we do save approximately $15 million over the cost of renovating and, $15 million off the cost of operating the 6 renovated buildings over the 10 years. So when we go back to the $1.25 million savings in operating costs at each of those buildings, within the first 10 years, we can save $15 million. Beyond that, we can save approximately $3.75 million in operating costs for each subsequent year once the 3 are all open together. So we do have a savings there, so we can turn those dollars, the general fund dollars, back into additional programs, potentially reduce classroom sizes, potentially new programs, more counselors. There's a myriad of things we can do with that money, reflective of some of the initiatives and some of the challenges we face demographically that we shared with you through our budget presentation back in February. Capital needs are reduced. So again, $31 million in savings in construction costs, building 3 as opposed to renovate the 6. We can reduce the deferred maintenance, actually eliminate the deferred maintenance on those 6 schools. So again, as Dr. Michael mentioned, sometimes when we are looking at a building that is potentially beyond its useful life, we're throwing good money after bad. We've got to fix this because that building has to make it a little bit longer. Whereas potentially we should be replacing that building or replacing the entire system so we can reduce our maintenance costs. It is a short-term increase with long-term overall savings. Again, looking at $2 million in the near term to save $31 million in the out years. That's the savings we're trying to impress upon you. Also, a reduction in future systemic costs. So again, boilers, chillers, roofs, window systems, and all of those 6 buildings that need to be replaced can come off the books in replace of the new buildings. Looking at the state considerations, we're not affecting our FY 2020 state CIP request. This is approximately $12.5 million for large capital projects and $5.5 million for systemic projects. We're not changing the FY 20 request. Moving forward through FY 21 through FY 28, it's anywhere between $8.2 million and $10.9 million for large capital projects. Based on what we're seeing, based on the allocation we received in FY 19, and based on discussions at the state level with an increase in capital funding for school construction at the state level that's been bandied about and talked about, we think getting that window is highly reasonable. We think that really is within the wheelhouse of what we can expect. Over the last number of years, on average, Washington County has received approximately $8.5 million in capital funding, and if there's an increase in the state allocation, we believe we can get up to the $10.5 million that we may need to bring this project to fruition. The state is considering changes to systemic project funding. That is a concern. There has been some discussion that all systemic funding will be local and will not be eligible for state support. So that is something we will have to continue to evaluate and monitor moving forward. We also believe that the use of prototype design could receive support from the state. There's a lot of discussion during the last legislative session on school construction and the use of prototype designs. And if we are one of the first to bring that to fruition, there may be additional opportunities at the state level for additional funding support for prototype designs to show that that's a system and a design process that can work and can save both local and state dollars. So we'd be encouraged to do that and to work through the state delegation to see if additional funding support is available. Looking at challenges and opportunities, some of the challenges, clearly our communities are familiar with the current schools. As we approached the facilities committee with this for initial design, initial concern that we saw from the community, additional feedback was about, we like our school, we like our neighborhood school, but again, we have a fiscally responsible plan based on current funding realities, and we want to work with you and partner with you on a plan that is fiscally responsible for the community moving forward. 3 less facilities to maintain in the future is also a savings for the community. Future redistricting will be required. We can't necessarily say that as we look at collapsing Greenbrier and Old Forge into one school, that district may not look the same as it does today. And so it will be a redistricting concern that we will have to work through with our community, with our Facilities Enrollment Advisory Committee, and we would be looking for your support as we work through that process. But again, we provide more elementary students newer facilities at a faster rate, and additionally additional pre-kindergarten seats, which is important to our academic growth of our students long term. There is an increase in the local CIP required. It does not affect the 2020 request, so in the near term, as you're starting to think, and Ms. Greaves and I had just a brief email conversation last night about the next year's budget calendar, thinking ahead into where we are, and does not affect your 2020 plan. And the Board of Education can provide an alternate plan in FY19. So a year down the road, if we determine that, collectively that this plan is just not going to work, it's a one-year plan. We can move forward, we can shift gears again next year, similar to the way we shifted gears from the 18 plan or the 17 plan to the 18 plan. There are unpredictable factors, and we will have to work through those, but the plan does provide flexibility. So again, the concept is to provide a prototype design that could be built initially as a 3-round, 4-round or 5-round, similar to what we did with Jonathan Hager, so that we can be flexible and nimble with the demographic changes within our community and within our neighborhoods. And lastly, we want to make you aware of major systemic projects that are on the horizon. We did submit Boonesboro Elementary and South Hagerstown High School for roof replacements for FY19 capital improvement funding. They were not funded at the state, so we're likely going to bring those forward for FY20 funding. You can also see other large replacements there. North Hagerstown High School's chiller, Smithsburg High School's HVAC system is probably the largest on the plan. That could be upwards of $6.5, $7 million. And you see a number of other systems that have to be replaced long-term that we will be presenting as part of the capital improvement project as we move into the fall. And with that, I think we can accept any questions that members may have. Mr. Myers.
On cost savings, I mean, I'm obviously very huge on that. Rob, whenever, and maybe you're already doing this, on your projects of schools that you have done over the past, I guess, year since you've been here, have you ever considered, or do you all specify, say, a brand of chiller, boiler, and so forth, that when it comes to efficiencies, that the people would have, I mean, you would have in all schools of the same brand, the same model, I mean, not model, but I mean, that you would be able to purchase directly and place to the contractor to install. Do you all do that now?
We don't do it right now.
Yeah.
There's been some talk downstate about maybe even collectively at the state level having a menu of
More and more of that.
components that,
I know Mr. Barr hates it because they come in spec his switchgear, which is a big ticket item, and they put it on site and he has to install it.
right.
So that was one. I guess it just another big cost savings. So, you know, I know what these portable classrooms cost, and I guess it just it makes me almost cringe when I see a brand new school being built, and then the first thing you do is start moving in the portable classrooms. Is it true that the state does not allow a little bit of thought process into expansion in the initial construction of the building?
I think the state always encourages us to plan our buildings to be expandable.
Not expandable, I'm talking about have space available on the, you know, that you know coming down. I mean, I see that,
Gotcha.
that you have the possibility of planned development, and we know it's coming.
So what the state does is we look at our enrollment projections, we present them to the state, and when we are requesting money for a building, they're looking at what the projected enrollment is 7 years from when we ask for funding. So it's usually about 4 years beyond when it opens. So they will fund the capacity of what we think it'll be 4 years beyond when we open. So in that way, they are trying to right-size the school
Okay.
for some growth.
But it would be up to the county and the Board of Ed. If we put our thought into it just prior to building, it would be our expense.
Well,
I mean, if you
if the
got to
growth
point
is,
of-
if the growth,
of where it is designed,
Mhm.
and you see it coming, you know, these developments pop up within a year,
Yeah.
it would be to the county and the Board of Ed's expense to basically build a bigger school to eliminate knowing that you're going to have to bring in portable classrooms.
yeah, once,
If we could see it coming within that 7-year period, the state will actually let us count those people that don't even exist yet, and they'll fund their portion of the project. If we think it's coming 10 years out, you know, they won't do that. But what we've done, like with Jonathan Hager, we've gone ahead and stubbed out that building, and we know exactly where the addition's going to go and that type of thing, which substantially reduce costs when you've gone ahead and run, you know, conduit and sewer and those types of things, and then you're set up to do that. But the state will let us use, you know, students that don't exist yet as long as we can project them and they're within the projections of the state as well.
but not once you're coming out of the ground. If you're in mid-construction,
I'm not even suggesting,
right,
you
yeah.
know, I'm
At
talking
that
prior
point,
to.
like at Salem Avenue, if you remember, there was an addition put on that building midstream. And I think that cost was all borne by the local taxpayers. Yeah.
And I think specifically to answer your question, if the state said you can support 400 students and the county and the Board of Ed decided we were building 600 students, the additional capacity above 400 students, the state would fund up to 400 at the 71-29 split rate. The county would be on the hook for the rest if that's what we collectively decided that we were going to build. I think that's the point of your question.
Yeah, also, we all know that those portable classrooms per square foot are very costly.
Yes.
And that would be a decision. I guess the question is, the state would have no buy-in unless we change something.
Yeah, and I don't think, to Dr. Michael's credit and the school boards, I don't think we've installed a portable classroom for 8 or 9 years now. So we've been able to avoid new portable classrooms. We may have moved a couple, but...
It's all in Frederick County. And I got one last question, and I'll shut up. We've had a lot of conversation lately about community centers. And I see here where, I guess I somewhat applaud where it can be opened up to the public. Has there ever been a conversation, or could we start to have a conversation with the commissioners in regards to more of a cooperative effort of, instead of us going out and building one in Clear Spring and Hancock and Sharpsburg or wherever, or one large one on the Sharpsburg Pike, where we could expand or, have a cooperative effort with the school board to have these community centers in the schools themselves and better utilize the square footage, the gyms and so forth. I know we'd wear them a little bit, but I believe that those monies could be diverted to our school system. We'd all benefit.
Right, so, that would...
Say our gyms are well used, particularly all the new buildings with the full-size gym. What we have been able to do for the community, and the community kind of chastises us for it, is we don't have bleacher space and things like that. So youth groups come in, or the tournament comes in, or whatever, and you have 200 people trying to sit down somewhere, and they have lawn chairs and lined up against the wall and standing there. But we haven't been able to have the resources to dedicate additional square footage that we wouldn't use during the day. I mean, that space would just be bleacher space or bare space that we wouldn't be able to utilize. We've put that space into the classroom because the state limits us. It's all about square footage. So when you dedicate, 3,000 or 4,000 square feet to bleachers, that's 3,000 or 4,000 square feet we could have put into classrooms, and our teachers are anxious for that square footage. But I think those are opportunities through local money we could look at. How do we add, a community room, a couple community type almost classrooms connected to the gym or cafeteria, that all that could be used, particularly in elementary schools. Middle schools and particularly high schools are used, hard at night with athletic teams and things like that. But all the, community gyms that we've built are available. I think Park and Rec is working with us on almost all the buildings. I can remember back in 2008 or 9 when we opened the 3 buildings all at once, there was going to be this $42,000 of additional county money to help support utilities and things like that at those 3 sites. So now we have 8 or 9 sites like that, and I don't think we've ever really collected on any of that money. But they are available and they're used heavily, and I think it would be, if you're going to build things like that, why not just tack on another oversized room or something if it's for groups to gather or something like that. Maybe it's connected to the gym. The other thing we've done with our gymnasiums, we purposely separated them a little bit from the building. We have ways of isolating them from the rest of the building. One of the mistakes I think we made in some of the early designs, once you were in the gym, you were in the whole building, and now that's no longer true. So it's important. We could do that with the community center as well. Gymnasium, maybe cafeteria, maybe 1 or 2 rooms for other types of community use. And it's still, you only unlock a certain portion of the building rather than the whole building having access to the public.
Solve a lot of problems that we get from another
Yep.
direction.
Right, and I've been involved in a project like that in Carroll County, where they actually had an oversized gymnasium, but then they also had a community room attached to the end of that. People could, they use that for senior citizens and other things, exercise classes during the day. It probably wasn't as isolated as what we need to have it done today with the security issues and things we have now 20 years past when we did that one, but those are all solvable. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think the thing we're hoping for is the county commissioners and staff of the county would start thinking about, even this plan requires a substantial amount of financial resources beyond what we're currently receiving. If the state suddenly cuts off money for systemic projects and pushes all that to the locals, I mean, that's going to be huge. Most of the other counties, particularly counties our size and larger, I mean, what we do here is if it's not state supported, we generally don't do it. The 2 roof projects that the state didn't support this year, we pushed them out a year. We just continue to patch those and things like that. to the extent that we can. But other counties go ahead and well beyond what the state's supporting. They fully support whole projects at the county level. We're going to have to start looking at that at some point here in the near future. So we have to substantially invest in capital resources at some point. So we're hoping, we've demonstrated one method that we can see that we can reduce long-term, but even with this $31 million reduction in these 6 schools, it's still real money to put up the 3 schools. And even to reduce our replacement to potentially 88 years would require right after these 3 schools, every 2 years, continue to open schools. The other big challenge we have, with the exception of E. Russell Hicks, all the middle schools were opened in the 70s. Well, soon they're going to be 50-plus years old. Majority of them are still partially open or completely open, except for the perimeter classrooms. And there's going to be a substantial amount of work to do with those, and they're large buildings. They're not the size of an elementary. They're large buildings. And pushing out Springfield, pushing out Western Heights is just deferring something that we should be doing real soon from an instructional standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint. So at some point, we got to sharpen our pencil here, and you can give us feedback on this plan. If you want us to do something different, we need that direction. But even with this aggressive plan, it still requires a lot more money. The state changes what they're doing with systemic projects. That will require a substantial investment in capital money. And even with this plan, we're still looking at 88 years, which for some buildings that are already 50, 60 years old, it still could be 20 years away before their turn comes. So. That's all we have, unless there's additional questions or thoughts.
Just a few comments and maybe a few questions. Generally, the concept is appealing that you increase efficiency. That's a good thing. I think citizens expect that of their government. This is something that I think you've been able to demonstrate rather well. The 50-year lifespan, I'm questioned sometimes about that. Could you just describe why there's a 50-year lifespan placed on the school? Is it because population changes in different parts of the county, so the school is no longer centrally located? Is it just because it's too expensive to update and maintain an older building? What is it that gives you that 50-year number?
Well, let me just, our goal would be 50 years, wouldn't necessarily replace it, but to renovate it might be another option. A facelift to the building, new carpet, changing rooms, design, painting, things like that. So it's not necessarily always replacing the school. What we do find is the state supports a replacement school and a renovated school at the same amount per square foot. So sometimes, and I mean, why do you see, Martin's grocery store or whatever built, and 20 years later they completely tear it down and build a whole new Martin's grocery store? Just from what's changed in their marketplace, it's cheaper to tear it down and rebuild it than it is to remodel it. So we look at that, and we have to go through a justification of that for the state. But I'll let Rob respond to the 50-year question.
Well, Dr. Michael's right. The buildings just wear out, especially the types that were built in the 70s, which are a construction that just doesn't last as long. There's also educational considerations. The whole way we teach, all those schools built in the 70s were mainly open schools and things. So whether we, as Dr. Michael said, whether we renovate them or fully modernize them or tear them down and build new, it's the same cost. It really is. If we build new, we can incorporate probably better all the technologies and all the room sizes and all the support spaces that are called for today that weren't called for back when they were built. So they not only age physically, but they age functionally. They just don't, they're not as good as an environment to teach kids in. That make sense?
It's no different. It's really no different than any property. You have 50 years is kind of the benchmark for a house. If you don't do anything to a house in 50 years, you've got problems. If it's 20 years old, our buildings are 20 years old, we have to do things to make sure that it stays and keeps an effective age that's low. That's why when Boyd and Rob talk about that 100-some year figure, we have to, if we do a renovation, it brings that down. new one brings it down a little farther. It's, a little bit of difference between Martin's and us, but because they're generally leasing their properties. In this case, we own them, so it's up to us to take care of them and make sure that they still are functional and ready for our kids to use and can be updated. It's hard to update a 100-year-old building. It costs sometimes more
It can.
than a new building. So this is a good plan.
It's good to know
The
that.
problem is that it's a lot of money. No matter what we do, it's a lot of money.
I think the perception was at 50 years, you have to replace the building.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily
my-
replace, it could be.
When I do a property, 50 years is my benchmark. If there's a house, nothing gets done to it in 50 years, it has an effective age of nothing, or of 50. If you put new kitchen in it or new bathrooms and stuff, and it's a 50-year-old house, it has an effective age of maybe 10 years, which means you can get 40 more years out of it. And that's what we've done with a lot of our buildings. They're getting much more than that 50 years.
So also, with this plan, we're looking at operational efficiencies. There's a whole host of reasons as to why we're talking about replacing these schools that are coming up on 50 years. At a middle school, say, if we were to look at that, we will do a feasibility study that studies whether or not it's best to keep the school and remodel it, or whether it's sometimes cheaper to build a new one. So we'll actually put a study together for every school like that and determine what the best path forward is, and then bring that to the collective board so that everybody can have comment on it.
In 50 years of wear and tear on these schools and the schools to be in the condition that they're in, that's pretty remarkable. Some of these schools are just,
Credit to Mr. Mills and his
yeah, it's unbelievable, the wear and tear and the use that our schools get. And when you start, just think 50 years, and I went to Williamsport, so I can remember the wear and tear when I was a student, and I can only imagine the wear and tear today. So that's pretty remarkable.
But I think, as Rob was saying, that's a credit to our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, to do a lot of hard work and take great pride in their buildings and things. I think the other challenge we have over the 50-year period is a lot of code things change. So right now we're bringing in a lot more outside air, fresh air into buildings as we renovate HVAC systems. ADA is a huge one. So you look at a school like Springfield Middle School, you start walking through there and you realize the ramps are too steep to meet current ADA codes. Do you go in there somehow and double the length of that ramp somehow? I mean, there's several ramps in there. Or do you start over on some type of property? A lot of life safety codes have changed. So there's just a lot of things like that we'd want to bring up to date. Definitely safety and security would always be a big thing as we look at some of these buildings. Particularly, we're going to try to focus on these open schools. A couple of them on the list, less of an issue at the school than others, and some of them really need enclosed classrooms at this point for reducing the distractions for the children and things like that. We really should do that today, yet some of these plans are 10 years out. So we appreciate your interest and would ask you to seriously consider how do we address long-term capital improvement projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have for today. I think the county commissioners wanted to talk about the urban improvement project.
I did have one question, Dr. Michael, and that's, if that's okay. President Baker. It's on this slide, it starts with 17, Educational Facilities Master Plan. Yes. Comparing to the next slide, which is Washington County approved. Not as used to your mic, sorry. Washington County approved capital improvement plan. The funding in 2019, FY 2019, went up by, over a period of 10 years, about $3 million from what was in 2017.
Is that per year, or that was over the
that was over the span of 10 years, if I'm correct. This is about 3 million, and I know in the first year or two, it was approximately 1.2 each year, so I'm trying to find how, with additional funding, the life cycle went from 141 to 188.
It's not necessarily it's not the funding level, it's the span of openings. So we projected through our capital improvement plan a building every 3 years. So 47 buildings times 3 is 141 years. The county's plan as presented was a building every 4 years. So 4 years times 47 is 188 years. So it's not necessarily that there's more or less funding. As I recall, I think the county added for some systemic funding that was not there, let's say in 17. So that really is the difference, is spreading of the openings of the buildings from 3 years to 4 years is what generates the change in years.
It's also important to note, this plan and any plan frozen in time is based on the dollars of that day. So all these numbers that we've thrown at you today are based on today's dollars. Obviously, they're going to change. I mean, the savings could increase, but the cost could increase too, based on what the cost of future dollars is. I know the state updates its allowable cost per square foot every year or every other year. And so some of the increases in our requests could be because the state itself is saying we're going to support a higher cost per square foot and pay 71% of that. So we adjust our budgets according to the construction market that's in place at the time that we request that money.
And do you go out further? In one of the latter slides here, it explains the master plan. It says 2.1 million above levels shown in FY19, whereas again, we did increase it, and I believe it's your prerogative to determine whether it goes toward new school or systemic. It's simply a funding level. Do you see future years beyond that 2.1? Does your plan show, in addition to FY19, what this would require?
I think if I'm getting to the point of your question, we looked at what the county approved for FY19, and we looked out through 2028 and said our need would be $2 million greater than what the county supported for the FY19 budget for capital.
Every year.
Every year moving forward.
The FY19 capital budget includes a 10-year lookout. The years that we'll be requesting funding for these 3 schools, we would see that we would need $2.1 million per year approximately in those years that we're building the schools. So it's not just FY19 that we're looking at. It's the FY19 10-year budget. These increases are most likely out starting in what, Chad? 22, 20, 21, 22, 23. Those years are where those increases are in today's dollars.
2.1 each year.
Correct.
Yes.
Approximately.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, President Baker, you're saying on the agenda we have Urban Improvement Project Board of Education funding. Was there something that the commissioners wanted to discuss with us or ask us, or?
I thought we were just getting an update.
Yes, I believe the commissioners and staff would be interested in moving forward with the contract, getting more information on the current status of BISFA as it relates to the construction underway now, what the contract is, and dollar value, contingencies, that type of thing.
Give us an update, Dr. Michael.
Yeah, I'll probably let staff go ahead and provide an update. We approved the contract with Bowman Development Corporation publicly. I guess that's been several board meetings ago. I think that information was reported in the paper, what that contract was valued at. We've signed that document. We're waiting for final signatures from Bowman Development Corporation. The building, the old building is well underway as far as demo. The newer part of that building, the block building in the back, has all been removed, and they're now in the process up towards what I refer to as the apartment building, is what it resembled to me when I was in it 10 years or so ago. So they're starting to take down that demo. Work right beside the UIP project is going on, obviously, with the theater and the alley work, and all that's moving along. And I think utility work in the back is about to start as well. So there's 3 projects right on top of each other right there, and that's moving along well. As you know, our project is fully funded through a variety of sources. With this kind of partnership project, we've got governor's money, our traditional IAC money, local money, Board of Education money, which is unusual to have on a project of this nature, as well as some various grants that we've been able to secure. So funding, we're in good shape on funding. The project's a little over $19 million in total. We have about $21 million identified in funding. The challenge we have right now is the various types of funding and how it needs to be used, and that's got to be orchestrated with the theater and other projects, including the city, to make sure we maximize those dollars most effectively. So that's kind of where we are at this point. I think we have a lot of unknowns. I know the theater discovered an oil tank in their property, and those kind of things require, some other types of things you have to go through, environmental issues, things like that. I think I heard with all the rain we have, there was a spring or groundwater that kind of affected 3 or 4 properties. I mean, I don't think it caused any great concern, but those are things that need to be mitigated and dealt with as you run into, which is just typical when you're dealing with old construction and marrying it up with new construction and things like that. So right now the project's moving along well. We think we're on schedule, and we're continuing to work with the other partners in cooperation to get the things completed on time.
Boyd, what are the 3 projects? The theater, the school, and the...
Well, the 3 projects are on top of each other. Utility work that the city's doing, so over $1 million worth of utility work. So if you're behind those buildings, there's big transformers up on some old telephone poles. There's wires galore, 10, 12, 15 wires, reaching from one pole to the next. A lot of that's got to come down, get out of the way, and especially if they build the plaza, which will connect all that behind the courthouse and behind all of our buildings and connect it to the cultural trail. I mean, that's going to make that whole back area look completely different. So that's one big project. Really, the part that's actually going to be underway is utility work, the theater project and our project. So those are the 3 projects that I'm referencing, and they're all right against each other.
What's the heating date of completion for you as well as the theater?
I don't know the date of the theater completion. Our completion is for the opening of 2020, school year opening.
Right. I think the theater is planning fall of 19, fall of next year, I believe, for their season, I think.
Yeah, I think they were, pretty much closed the theater for summer work, and then they'll reopen the theater, I think, here another couple months, continue work while the theater's open for various performances. And then I think they close again next summer. When I say close, do final work next summer, and when they open for their new season in the fall, I think is their target date. But I don't want to speak.
Keller on one and Callis on the other?
Correct.
Also, you'd mentioned that the Bowman Development Corporation hasn't signed their contract yet. What are they going to be responsible for?
They're responsible for their contract with Callis and construction of our building. So it's just a formality at this point that we're waiting for their final signature on the document. But they've moved forward at their own risk, and we're cooperating with them. So.
Well, Rob, what was it that we've already signed? I thought what contract did we enter into there when they were trying to get us to agree to move forward with a contract?
We don't have a contract on any of these construction projects. We are in agreement on funding processes, and those are pretty well known here. The board being $4 million, and other Maryland Theater funding left over from that would be sought to help assist the Maryland Theater, so.
So in the Bowman contract, is there an amount already agreed upon?
Right, right. Our board's already approved. I mean, you guys can share the numbers.
So during our board approval back in May, we approved up to 18.6 million with Bowman Development Corporation. That includes all construction costs, contingencies, A&E fees, allowances for utility connections and things of that nature, as well as the cost of the land as well. Beyond that, we have about approximately 52,000 that'll be payable to the Maryland Theater for the connecting bridge that'll be built by Morgan Keller between the theater and our new building that Bowman is building. And we have fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. So our expected total cost is approximately $19,300,000.
And I should further state that what we did enter into as the county is an agreement with the state of Maryland for funding, and that has been 2.5 million to the Board of Ed, 5 million to the Maryland Theater, and that is of the governor's money. So we do have effectual contracts or grants obligations to be fulfilled, yes.
So what happens if Bowman comes back and wants a lot more money? What happens to the project?
A contract is a gross maximum price with contingencies built in. And we truly believe at this point that the final dollars will be less.
What's your timeline expected on getting that contract finalized?
I think it's imminent any day, but I'd have to defer to legal counsel.
Okay. Anything else on the UIP?
No, sir, not for me.
Questions from the commissioners on the UIP? Okay. Well, we're on schedule to depart, 10:05. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you,
It's all your
President.
fault. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, President Baker.
Okay. Thank you.